Today we're breaking down the instrument panel of a typical single-engine airplane like a Cessna 172, and by the end of this video, you'll understand what all those gauges and screens actually do. I'm not going to do whiteboard style for this one, since a lot of this will be me actually showing you the instruments and what they do. I know that when I was learning about the instrument panel, if I had had to learn them by just reading a bunch of words on paper, I probably still would not know what they do. So I'm going to make this one a little more visual. Let's jump right in. In traditional training aircraft, the most important flight instruments are arranged in what's called the six-pack. These 6 instruments are grouped together right in front of the pilot and consist of the airspeed indicator, the attitude indicator, the altimeter, the turn coordinator, the heading indicator, the vertical speed indicator, and the eject indicator. Yeah, I'm kidding about that last one, but basically it's just a bunch of indicators. They're pretty straightforward. Let's go through them one by one. The airspeed indicator tells us how fast the airplane is moving through the air, not over the ground but through the air, and there is a difference. While speed on the ground is typically measured using miles or kilometers per hour, airspeed is measured in terms of knots. If you look closely, the airspeed indicator also contains different colored sections which are referred to as arcs. These arcs represent different categories of airspeed called V-speeds, and we will discuss those in a separate lesson down the road. For now, just know these broad meanings of each colored arc. These are important to be aware of during takeoff and landing, as well as for avoiding stalls. Next, we have the attitude indicator, which is also sometimes still referred to as the artificial horizon, which is the more old-timey term for it. This is often considered to be the most important instrument. I'm not sure how I agree with that, but you can decide for yourself. The blue portion represents the sky, and the brown portion represents the ground. And basically, it shows the airplane's orientation, or attitude, relative to the horizon, specifically the plane's roll and pitch. This is especially handy in low visibility, since you won't really be able to see the horizon. This instrument will help you stay level. The attitude indicator also displays your bank angle when making turns. The tick marks range from 0 degrees to 60 degrees, and even show 90 degrees if you're doing a 90-degree turn. Don't do that. When you make a turn, you typically want to keep it within 20 to 30 degrees. These tick marks will be good to be aware of when we later discuss the concept of load factor. The altimeter is pretty straightforward. You probably guessed by the name, but its job is to show you your altitude. The long, broad arrow shows hundreds of feet, the short, overweight arrow shows thousands of feet, and the long, skinny arrow shows tens of thousands of feet. There's 2 primary altitudes to consider, which are mean sea level, or how high an object is above the sea, and above ground level, or how high an object is off the ground. The altimeter displays altitude readings in mean sea level. Now it works off air pressure, and the pilots must regularly adjust it to match local pressure settings. If you don't set it correctly, you could be hundreds of feet off. That would be bad. This smaller section here is called the Colesman window, and it displays what the barometric pressure setting is at. I'll do an entire video on barometric pressure and local pressure and how to make sure you have your altimeter set right. But for now, just be aware that the altimeter displays your altitude and make sure you know how to read it. This more minimalistic one here with the fancy miniature airplane on it is called the turn coordinator. This shows the rate at which the airplane is turning and whether or not it is a coordinated turn. You ever use one of those levels when helping your dad as a kid? Well, this is like one of those, but for showing how coordinated the airplane's turn is, in which direction you need to apply rudder. If the little ball in the tube is centered, you're using proper rudder input. If the ball is not centered, then you know you need to apply rudder. A common rule you'll probably hear early on is to step on the ball, the step referring to stepping on the rudder pedals. So if the ball in the tube moves to the right, you know you need to apply right rudder. If the ball moves to the left, apply left rudder. It's that simple. The function of the heading indicator is pretty basic. Think of it as a more stable compass. The magnetic compass tends to spin around during turns, making it difficult to get a proper heading while you're turning. This is where the heading indicator comes in. While it does need to be adjusted at times using the little knob just below it, it remains still during changes in attitude, allowing you to properly see which direction you're going. If you look at it, you can see your 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, but you also see all these numbers. Don't freak out because you see numbers. I only say that because I do. They simply represent different magnetic headings or headings with reference to magnetic north as opposed to true north. True north being in regard to the North Pole, allegedly where Santa lives, and magnetic north being in regard to the magnetic North Pole, which is somewhere in Canada. So when you see 33 here, that means a magnetic heading of 330 degrees. When you see 6, that means a magnetic heading of 60 degrees. Just add a 0 to any of those numbers you see, and you'll have your magnetic heading. This instrument is crucial for navigation. And then you got your vertical speed indicator. This instrument shows you your rate of climb and rate of descent, or how quickly you're moving up or down. It reads in measurements of hundreds of feet per minute. So if the hand is on the +5, you know you're ascending by 500 feet per minute. If the hand is on -10, you know you're descending by 1,000 feet per minute. The vertical speed indicator is handy for multiple reasons. For one, it can be useful for seeing if you're gaining or losing altitude when trying to maintain level flight. At times, it can be a more precise indication of this than the altimeter can. Any pitch up or down is going to show up on the VSI. It's also handy though because being aware of your rate of climb or descent is very important. Climbing too fast is usually unsafe and can lead to stall conditions, but watching your rate of climb can also just help you fly more efficiently and preserve fuel. Descending too fast can lead to unstable approaches and other safety issues. Alright, those are the primary 6. Now we'll look at these others just so you know what they are, but I'll only cover surface level because their functions pertain to more complicated subjects that we won't get into just yet. These are the engine instruments. They tell us how the engine is performing. This here is the tachometer, or the RPM gauge, and it shows engine revolutions per minute, or RPMs. It's crucial for managing power settings during climb, cruise, and descent. When you use the throttle control to increase or decrease power, you'll see the needle on the tachometer raise or lower depending on your input. This one shows us the oil pressure and oil temperature. Oil pressure tells us whether the engine is being properly lubricated. Low oil pressure is an emergency. Oil temperature tells us whether the engine is overheating. Be watchful of these two because if your engine is about to die, some warning will certainly help. Flying without an engine is no joke, especially if you're in a single engine plane.
If I'm not careful, I'm going to...
These here are fuel gauges. They show how much fuel is in each tank. I will say, these are notoriously unreliable, especially in older aircraft, so a lot of pilots use fuel calculations and time tracking. That's also why it's so important to check the fuel tanks manually before each flight. And then this is the exhaust gas temperature, or EGT gauge. It basically just helps pilots fine-tune the fuel mixture and monitor overall engine health. As far as your navigation instruments, you have your VOR indicators and your GPS units. VOR stands for VHF omnidirectional range and is pretty much just a short-range radio navigation system that helps aircraft determine their position. It's not used very often anymore, but it can be handy to be aware of in case your GPS goes out and you drop your phone out the window. The GPS works pretty similar to the old GPS systems your parents had in the car when you were younger. They're not super complex, but they do have moving maps that show what you need to know, which are terrain, traffic, and weather. Alright, that's a wrap for this lesson. When I got into the cockpit for the first time, I took one look at the instrument panel and was like, no. There was so much there, I just thought, how in the world am I going to keep track of all this? I can now say it gets a lot more manageable with time and practice. I started really getting the hang of it after just 5 to 10 flights. And I promise the more you actually fly, you'll catch on to all this stuff a lot easier than you would just sitting here listening to me rant about parts and principles. So just remember that if you start feeling overwhelmed. All of this will become second nature over time. Alright, well next, as promised, we'll start on the internal of the 6-pack and discuss the 4 different systems that ensure these instruments are working properly. It's going to be fun. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know in the comments. My priority here is for you guys to learn this stuff in the easiest, most efficient way possible. If you have any feedback, I would love to hear from you. Thanks guys, I'll see you in the next one.